Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror TV series named Loki Season 1. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama begins with Loki, the Prince of Asgard and God of Mischief, has never been so speechless as today. His brother Thor, who grew up together, and the Avengers consisted of a group of humans, beat him up and planned to take him back home to lock him in a dark room, because Loki just wanted to get the cosmic cube, and maybe take over Earth and rule humans while he was at it. Because of that, his grand plan to rule the world was cut short unexpectedly. At this moment, Loki noticed there were two Iron Men. He immediately understood that the Avengers were time traveling, but they didn't expect the cosmic cube to slip under Loki's feet amidst the chaos. With a flash, he escaped to the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. However, his landing was a bit awkward. It wouldn't have been a big deal, but a crowd of onlookers made it embarrassing. Loki quickly climbed onto a rock, intending to give a speech, when a group of strange people surrounded him, eyeing his cosmic cube and trying to arrest him. As a god, Loki wasn't afraid of these heavily armed humans. But before he could react, the leader knocked his muscles down and put a collar around his neck. Confused, Loki was forcibly taken away without understanding the situation. He was escorted to a strange hall where he tried to escape, but was toyed with by a female hunter codenamed B-15. Apparently, she held a time reversal device that could control the time of the collar-wearing person. Loki finally gave in and asked where he was, but B-15 refused to explain and handed the cosmic cube to the front desk for safekeeping. Then she pushed Loki into an elevator, where he faced humiliation. A robot that only made facial expressions stripped him clean, not even waiting for him to speak before throwing him to the next floor. Fortunately, a one-button outfit change saved him from further embarrassment. On the next floor, a clerk appeared, holding a stack of papers for Loki to sign, stating that they were all the words he had ever spoken. Surprisingly, for every explanation Loki gave, the printer would automatically print out a new page. Left with no choice, he reluctantly signed the papers. It seemed that he had to go through these procedures to find out what was really going on. However, the clerk showed no mercy, throwing Loki to the next floor as soon as he finished signing. Next up was a test of personal attributes. A little old man in charge of the checkpoint asked Loki to confirm whether he knew he wasn't a robot, but rather an organic being with a soul. Upon hearing this question, Loki wondered if there were people who actually didn't know they were robots. The checkpoint man didn't answer, but after confirmation, he instructed Loki to walk through a machine in front of him. Loki was a bit worried. What if he was a robot but didn't know it? The checkpoint man replied that the machine would melt him, which sounded quite scary. Loki was confident he wasn't a robot, but he took a deep breath before passing through. After the flash of light, nothing happened. A photo appeared next to him, but the checkpoint man only mentioned it was a reality aura without explaining further, and urged Loki to move on to the next place. This time, it was a large hall, but with only two people present, Loki wondered if it was necessary to take a number and wait in line. He found it a bit troublesome, but he did as instructed. However, during the process, a television caught his attention. It turned out that the Time Variance Authority, TVA, was born from a great multiversal war, where countless timelines crisscrossed and fought for supremacy, almost leading to the destruction of infinite universes. At this critical moment, three godlike beings who called themselves Timekeepers appeared. They merged the multiverse into a single timeline, restoring peace. This main timeline became known as the Sacred Timeline, which the Timekeepers specifically maintained. To ensure the orderly nature of time and prevent the emergence of a multiverse that could destroy the world again, the Timekeepers created the TVA, a law enforcement organization that could span across the multiverse. The TVA handled trivial matters on behalf of the Timekeepers, helping to maintain the sacred timeline. People whose actions deviated from the sacred timeline were time criminals called variants, and the TVA was responsible for capturing and prosecuting them accordingly. Loki was one such variant, but he almost laughed out loud after watching the educational animation. As a god, he wondered how he could be unaware of such an organization if it really existed. At that moment, a variant who tried to enter without a ticket was stopped, displaying an extremely arrogant attitude. The guard immediately dealt with him. Seeing this, Loki hurriedly searched for his own ticket. Once in court, Loki finally had the chance to communicate with others. He told the judge that as a god, he wouldn't plead his case. He admitted to being a criminal, but only in the sense of being a heartbreaker, not a variant. He argued that the real criminals should be the Avengers, who had traveled through time. Loki couldn't help it that his future self was so exceptional that they were forced to change the timeline. However, the judge dismissed Loki's delusions, stating that the actions of the Avengers were meant to happen, while his escape wasn't. He had no grounds for argument. Loki found the situation amusing and prepared to use his magical powers, only to find that they were completely ineffective here. The scene became awkward, with some even laughing at him. The judge, puzzled, asked what was going on. B-15 explained that Loki was trying to use his magic, but it was useless within the time variance authority. Seeing that Loki had no way to argue his case, the judge ultimately decided on a reset. Loki didn't understand the meaning behind it, but he could sense it was a bad thing. He tried to resist the guard's restraints, but at that moment, TVA agent Mobius intervened. He wanted to have a private conversation with Loki. However, Loki remained on guard and even threatened Mobius on their way, demanding to be released. As Loki looked out the window, he couldn't help but stare in awe. It was as if everything before him had been enchanted. He wondered if such a civilization could really exist. Despite his reluctance, Loki was taken to Mobius's office. Mobius needed Loki's help for certain matters, but first, he needed to understand him. Loki had a well-planned path for himself. First, to rule Earth, then his homeland Asgard, followed by the 9 realms of the gods, and ultimately, the entire universe. Mobius was impressed by the ambitious plan. Loki suspected that Mobius was mocking him, but Mobius quickly clarified that it wasn't his intention. He simply wanted Loki to face himself honestly and asked what drove him to pursue these goals. Mobius revealed that he had been pursuing a variant who always managed to escape and had even killed several time guards. This case had been a headache for Mobius, but when he saw Loki's file, a new idea came to him. Mobius needed Loki's help, but Loki didn't cooperate. He had already guessed what kind of place this was. Loki believed that his choices were his own, and everything he had achieved came from his own actions, not because they were meant to be. After listening to Loki, Mobius decided to show him a recording containing important moments from his life, both past and future. If Loki hadn't picked up the cosmic cube, he would have been imprisoned on the proper timeline, seeking revenge against his brother and inadvertently causing the death of his adoptive mother, Frigga. Loki couldn't believe it. Frigga had always treated him as her own, even teaching him magic. Although he was adopted, Loki had long considered Frigga his real mother. He refused to believe it was true, but Mobius insisted that this was the correct flow of time, destined to happen again and again. Unable to contain himself, Loki lunged at Mobius, only to be knocked down by a small time reversal device. Mobius then told Loki that he wasn't born to be a king. Loki's birth had caused pain, torment, and death, and it would continue to do so in the past, present, and future. Mobius's words made Loki feel like his existence was merely a stepping stone for others. Unwilling to face this reality, Mobius reluctantly revealed the urgent task at hand. As he pulled Loki up, B-15 entered the room, seeking Mobius. The two left the office for a moment, but when Mobius returned, Loki was gone. It turned out that Loki had escaped using the time reversal device. His first mission was to find the cosmic cube, which was located at the front desk. Loki threatened the receptionist to hand over the cosmic cube, and they pulled it from a drawer. Loki was taken aback when he noticed a pile of infinity stones in the drawer. The receptionist didn't know what Loki was talking about, but there were plenty of these stones around, often used as paperweights by the staff. Loki's world was shaken. In his universe, Thanos and his followers had desperately sought the Infinity Stones, sacrificing countless lives in the process. Yet here, they were everywhere, treated like unwanted trash. As Loki's emotions swirled, B-15 found him. Loki used the reversal device again to escape, returning to the office. Unable to resist, he watched the recording of his adoptive mother's death. Loki knew Mobius had told the truth, but the reality was heartbreaking. He had hurt the person who loved him the most. Loki continued to watch the footage. He then saw Odin, his strict adoptive father, and heard his approval. It was a bittersweet moment, realizing that his father loved him equally. Next, he saw his brother Thor. After losing their parents, the two reconciled and fought side by side. When Loki heard Thor wanted to embrace him, he couldn't help but smile. In the future, he would be accepted by those he loved. But then, Thanos appeared. Loki's relaxed expression turned serious as he watched himself being choked to death. The moment his neck snapped, he could hardly bear to watch. When he looked up, the reel had reached its end. His life story was over. Loki couldn't help but laugh. His faith, determination, and sacrifices, all that he once believed in, no longer existed. Just then, B-15 rushed over and asked what was so funny. Loki had fulfilled his mission and they began to fight. But this time, Loki wouldn't let himself be controlled. He grabbed the time reversal device and captured B-15, knowing that the key lay in the collar. So he locked it around her neck, using her own method against her. Loki played around and then sat quietly, contemplating his next move. At that moment, Mobius returned. Loki knew he couldn't mess up his timeline anymore, so he calmly answered Mobius's previous question. In truth, Loki didn't enjoy hurting others. He did it because he felt he had no choice. Mobius wanted to know what he meant by that. Loki explained it was a cruel and carefully designed deception, a tool for the weak to manipulate and create fear. Seeing that Loki had found his true self, Mobius finally felt at ease. Perhaps he couldn't offer redemption, but he could give Loki a better choice. A rogue variant had killed the TVA hunters, and Mobius needed Loki's help to stop them. Loki didn't understand why Mobius would choose him. As it turned out, the variant they were chasing was none other than Loki himself. On another timeline, several hunters were fixing errors when a mysterious figure appeared and started a fire. The area instantly ignited, engulfing all the hunters in flames. This mysterious person was none other than another Loki. The TVA couldn't handle him, which led Agent Mobius to decide on sparing Loki's life, using his power to fight the variant Loki. Sure enough, during their first collaboration, Loki discovered a trap set by his alternate self. Unlike previous instances where TVA's hunters were killed, this time the variant Loki kidnapped a hunter, C-20. Logically, the TVA would try to recover the hunter, but Loki suspected this was part of the variant's plan. The moment they left the tent, they would be assassinated. Loki believed the variant Loki wanted not the TVA hunter, but Loki himself, intending to join forces and overthrow the TVA. Loki could guarantee the capture of the variant Loki, but only if Mobius assured that the TVA wouldn't betray him once the mission was complete. How could the God of Mischief be easily tamed? He didn't believe in the predetermined paths for all things, or the so-called protectors of the timeline. Regardless of Loki's beliefs, Mobius only needed to catch the variant. So he decided to have Loki review all the case files, hoping that Loki's unique perspective might reveal new clues. After finishing their conversation, Mobius went to have lunch. Loki looked at the pile of complex case files, finding the content to be repetitive. Either a group of TVA hunters was killed on a specific date, or a time reset device was stolen at a particular moment. He wondered what was worth noticing. Suddenly, Loki realized that there must be information about the Time Variance Authority in the archives. However, whether it was the origin of the TVA, the beginning of time, or the end of time, all documents were classified, and Loki had no access to them. He could only see his own records. When he saw the Asgard destruction event, he couldn't help but stop and watch carefully. Asgard was Loki's homeland, and though he hadn't witnessed the annihilation, the written description was shocking. It was where he grew up, and it had ultimately met a tragic end. As Loki continued reading, he noticed a line of text. He knew where the variant Loki was hiding, so Loki began sharing his theory with Mobius. The TVA could only capture related events, like someone doing something they shouldn't, causing a chain reaction of events that shouldn't happen. This would continue until a new timeline branch appeared. Mobius knew all this, but what did it have to do with the variant? The connection was significant. Loki picked up Mobius's lunch and used the salad dressing to represent Asgard on the brink of destruction. Before the destruction, he could do anything, such as setting fire to the palace. When the end arrived, everything would cease to exist, including everything Loki had done. In other words, if the people or things around you were destined to be destroyed, your actions wouldn't affect the timeline. Therefore, Loki deduced that the variant was hiding in an apocalyptic event. To prove his guess, he needed to visit an apocalypse for verification. However, Mobius wasn't willing to trust Loki easily because this could be a ploy to lure him out and then stab him in the back. But in the end, Loki managed to persuade Mobius. The two of them arrived in Pompeii in the year 79 AD, just minutes before the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Loki shouted and made a scene, prophesying the volcanic eruption. Mobius found Loki's antics headache-inducing, but when he checked the detector, everything was normal. There were no timeline anomalies confirming Loki's hypothesis. Mobius returned to the TVA with Loki, and together they investigated various apocalyptic events, looking for the possible locations of the variant. These events had to be natural, sudden, and without warning, ultimately leaving no survivors. But there were many such disasters in Earth's history, and they couldn't finish examining them all in a night. So the two went out for coffee to refresh themselves. Loki didn't understand why Mobius had unwavering faith in the existence of the TVA. Although Loki didn't believe he was created, Mobius argued that life was inherently meaningless, but one could find meaning in it. Mobius believed that his purpose was closely related to the time variance authority, maintaining the proper order of time. Loki, on the other hand, resented the so-called order. He believed that someone else should not dictate his life, and his free will should not be denied by others. There were no purely evil or purely good people. This statement made Mobius think. He recalled that the variant had left a box of custom-made candy at a previous crime scene. This candy had been sold in specific regions between 2047 and 2051. Following this clue, the two quickly narrowed down the most likely location of the variant. In 2050, at Roxcart, Mobius and the TVA hunters arrived in the rain. As soon as they entered, Loki used his magic to dry himself. It turned out that his magic was restored whenever he left the TVA. The group began their search. Under normal circumstances, Loki should have been in the same team as Mobius, but the Hunters team leader B-15 didn't trust Loki. She insisted on monitoring him closely. During the search, B-15 and Loki encountered a passerby. When B-15 checked the person's identity, she was suddenly grabbed and the passerby collapsed. When B-15 turned around, her attitude had completely changed. The variant Loki had possessed her. However, there could only be one dominant Loki, and the two Lokis in the same space didn't think much of each other. They both considered the other to be an inferior version of themselves. At this moment, a supermarket stock clerk noticed the two and approached to greet them. The variant Loki seized the opportunity to possess the clerk. Loki proposed working together to overthrow the timekeepers, but hearing this, the variant Loki's expression turned serious. When he realized that Loki wanted to cooperate, he scoffed, as his plan was different. He had no interest in ruling over the TVA. Loki inquired about the variant Loki's purpose, noticing a nearby time reset device. He realized that the variant Loki was stalling for time, luring the TVA agents in and planning to blow them up, but it was too late. The variant Loki switched to a larger body and quickly knocked Loki down. It seemed that every sorcerer had a hidden desire for close combat. Loki insisted on fighting hand-to-hand, only to be easily defeated. The large man calmly installed a bomb, and as the countdown reached 0, a female Loki named Sylvie appeared. At that very moment, time reset devices activated one after another. The TVA's monitoring center detected that the timeline was continuously branching. They had to deploy all timekeepers to repair the damage. Actually, this was Sylvie's goal, to completely destroy the main timeline and plunge the entire universe into chaos. She opened a time door, leaving the choice to the other Loki, to join her or not. Seeing Mobius and the others approaching, Loki didn't hesitate and headed through the door. Soon after, Mobius found the kidnapped C-20, who seemed deranged, repeatedly muttering that this is real, until Mobius woke her up. C-20 regained a bit of clarity but became even more agitated, as she had revealed the location of the timekeepers to Sylvie. It appeared that the bombing of the main timeline was not just to create chaos, but also to distract the TVA. In order to maintain the main timeline, the TVA dispatched many hunters to various points in time. Loki initially wanted to collaborate with Sylvie under the guise of capture, but Sylvie not only disdained this partnership, she even refused to use the name Loki. Loki didn't insist, as Sylvie attacked immediately. For a moment, Loki wondered if Sylvie had grown up in Asgard, as she was so violent. Loki no longer wanted to yield to her, and during their fight, the TVA's leader appeared. Sylvie quickly captured Loki, intending to use this TVA pawn as a bargaining chip. Little did she know, Loki had no real value to be exploited. At a critical moment, Loki opened a time door, teleporting them away. However, the TemPad belonged to Sylvie, who didn't care about Loki's well-being. Unfortunately, the TemPad ran out of power and could not be used. Furious, Sylvie wanted to kill Loki, but his magic skills came in handy. With a diversion, Loki managed to get hold of the TemPad. Just as the two were about to fight again, a small meteorite crashed in. The time door had brought them to the year 2077, the day the Lamentis 1 satellite was destroyed. It was the most dangerous apocalypse, with no escape for the planet's inhabitants. Sylvie loathed Loki, as her mission was incomplete and she had been brought to this dreadful place. Although she could fix the TemPad, it was in Loki's possession, and they had to cooperate to leave. First, they needed to charge the TemPad. Soon, they found a wooden cabin. Sylvie realized that brute force wouldn't work, unlike Loki, who knew strategies and tricks. Looking at the old woman's photo inside the cabin, they assumed it was her beloved husband. Then, Loki transformed into the husband, ready to showcase his acting skills. But after uttering just a few words, he was thrown out like an adult toy. As it turned out, the old man hadn't said anything sweet to the old woman for 30 years. The two learned from the old woman that there was a giant escape ship, the Ark, with enough power to charge the Tempad. However, the Ark was far away, and they needed to take a train to get there. Not to mention boat tickets, they didn't even have train tickets. Sylvie planned to possess a guard to get them on the train and let the guards fight each other if discovered. But Loki had his own idea, instantly transforming into a guard. Confidently, he thought no one would check his ticket, but that wasn't the case. No one, regardless of their appearance, could enter the station without a ticket. In the end, it was Sylvie's quick thinking that allowed them to successfully sneak into the train compartment. After a long day of struggles, Sylvie was tired but couldn't rest, as the area was not safe. However, she thought Loki could afford to sleep for a while since she couldn't steal the Tempad anyway. Loki had hidden it using magic, and even if she wanted to, she couldn't get it without proper magical training. She remembered that Loki's magic was taught by his mother, while in her world, her mother had passed away long ago, leaving her with vague memories. Sylvie knew she was adopted, but Loki didn't. Eventually, they told Loki the truth. Instead of dwelling on that, they discussed their mother, who had personally taught Loki magic. He started with simple tricks like turning flowers into frogs and producing fireworks with his bare hands. As a child, Loki worried he would never learn, but his mother's encouragement kept him going. Sylvie, on the other hand, had taught herself magic. Although not as orthodox as Loki's, she had discovered quite a few techniques, with possession being her most common one. Loki was curious about how she had managed to do that. Just then, a waitress brought champagne. Sylvie wasn't interested, but Loki was. He drank 2 glasses and then started philosophizing about love. Sylvie believed love might be the same as hate. Loki was struck by this thought and wanted to remember it. Their relationship seemed to progress, and Sylvie decided to relax and rest. However, when she woke up, she found Loki not only singing and dancing, but also having changed his disguise as a guard. Not everyone was a fool, and someone would surely notice something was off about Loki. When Sylvie went to remind him, she found him reeking of alcohol, having forgotten their need for discretion. As they argued, a passenger called a guard to check Loki's ticket. Instead of acting sensibly, Loki performed his firework magic, clearly intoxicated. Sylvie decided to fight, and Loki joined her with his magical attacks. In the midst of the chaos, Loki was thrown off the train like an adult toy by 2 guards. Sylvie, seeing the situation escalate, abandoned the guards and jumped out of the window after him. Once she confirmed Loki was unharmed, she drew her sword and demanded the Tempad. Loki obediently produced it, only to find that it had been crushed during the fall. Sylvie was at her wit's end, unable to tolerate Loki's antics any longer. Carefully, he sat beside her, pondering their next move. Loki suggested they board the Ark and leave, but Sylvie explained that the Ark had been destroyed before it even took off. Loki then proposed that they steal the Ark before its destruction, escaping the satellite. For once, Sylvie didn't argue. They had to seize their last chance, but without the train, they had no choice but to walk the long distance. To pass the time, Loki asked Sylvie about her possession skills. This time, she openly explained the principles behind her abilities. To help Loki understand, she used the example of a TVA agent she had previously captured. First, Sylvie needed to access her memories from before joining the TVA, modify them, and then she could gain full control over the agent. She also told Loki that before joining the TVA, those agents were actually variants. Loki finally realized that the entire TVA was a scam, and the timekeepers were not what they seemed. They had to get out of there alive. When they arrived at the location of the Ark, they faced the dilemma of how a single escape ship could accommodate the entire satellite's population. Chaos ensued as people tried to board the Ark, and even the guards' efforts to control the crowd were in vain. They looked up to see a planet approaching with countless meteorites crashing towards them, causing the satellite's destruction. Everything would turn to dust after the collision, so they had to hurry and board the ship. Other than the obstacles caused by the meteorites, the guards were also desperately blocking their way. After overcoming numerous challenges, they finally reached the boarding gate, only to find they were one step too late. As the end of the world approached, they were powerless to stop it. Taking advantage of the situation, Sylvie shared stories from her childhood with Loki. Apparently, Sylvie had been very compassionate as a child, but was taken away by the TVA for being a variant. They accused her of intentionally disrupting the sacred timeline, but Sylvie didn't know what she had done. All she knew was that she couldn't stay there, so she stole the time controller and grew up alone on the run, always on guard for a sudden appearance of a portal that might take her away. When Loki heard about Sylvie's past, he could better understand her, and even developed a special bond with her. Despite the impending apocalypse, they didn't feel alone because of each other's presence. At that moment, two portals suddenly appeared in front of them. It was unclear whether this was a blessing or a curse. They escaped the end of the world but ended up back in the TVA. Upon seeing them, Agent Mobius was furious. He had saved Loki from being pruned, thinking they would work together to capture Sylvie, but it turned out they were on the same side. Loki was thrown mercilessly into a portal, leading to his homeland's temple. There, an old friend, Sif, appeared with her hair chopped off, slapped Loki in anger. It was true that Loki used to enjoy playing pranks and had once cut off Sif's hair. Although he received a minor punishment, he quickly forgot about it. However, Loki couldn't laugh now as Sif reappeared and beat him up before leaving. The relentless attacks were unbearable, and each time Sif's actions and words were identical. Loki knew that Sif was just a reconstruction of a past scene, but his powers were limited in this place. He couldn't interrupt or fight back, only suffer the repeated beatings. Loki couldn't take it anymore. He sincerely apologized to Sif, admitting that he was wrong. He truly was wrong. He was a terrible person. Loki had cut Sif's hair, claiming it was just for fun, but it wasn't fun at all. He just craved attention from others. This time, Sif didn't kick him, but she didn't forgive him either. After Sif left, Mobius appeared. It was time to interrogate Loki. Theoretically, the Time Variance Authority couldn't detect temporal anomalies within apocalyptic events. However, the two Lokis had done something that caused the timeline branch to rise almost linearly, an unprecedented event in the TVA's history. This caught their attention, so both Lokis, who should have been pruned, were temporarily held and interrogated separately. As the God of Mischief, Loki should have guessed. Seeing that Loki was unyielding, Mobius decided to send him back to the time prison, allowing Sif to teach him a lesson. Loki immediately changed his tune, confessing everything. He claimed he was the mastermind, and Sylvie was just being used by him. Once Loki achieved his goal, he would eliminate Sylvie. However, Loki's tricks were easily seen through by Mobius, who didn't expose him. Instead, Mobius played along, saying there was no need to take action, because Sylvie had already been pruned. Loki was stunned. He repeatedly asked Mobius if Sylvie had indeed been pruned. When he received a confirmation, Loki forced a smile and pretended not to care, continuing to face Mobius's interrogation. Mobius couldn't help but laugh, saying that Loki had fallen in love with himself. Even Loki hadn't realized it, but Mobius had hit the nail on the head with just a few words. Mobius had figured out what caused the temporal anomaly during the apocalypse. The two variants, having the same essence, admired each other. This chaotic, not meant to exist emotion broke reality, causing the timeline branch to extend crazily. Now, the case was finally closed. Loki didn't care about any of this. He just wanted to know if Sylvie was still alive. Hearing Mobius's affirmative response, Loki was relieved. Seeing Mobius wholeheartedly working for the TVA, Loki felt compelled to shatter his illusions. The Timekeepers claimed to have created Mobius and all the Time Guards, but that wasn't the truth. Sylvie could see the past of the Time Guards through possession. Everyone at the TVA was a variant who once had their own lives and were kidnapped and had their memories altered to work there. Mobius listened quietly to Loki's words, finally praising his answers. After Mobius finished his report, it was decided that the two Lokis would be sent for judgment. But before that, Mobius thought Loki should accompany Sif for a while. Though he said he didn't believe Loki, Mobius couldn't help but have doubts in his mind. He pondered over Loki's words until Ravana, the judge of TVA, signed the case-closing documents. When Ravana asked Mobius where and when he would go if he could choose, he didn't have the heart to think about it. But looking at Ravana, he couldn't help but recall two things. First, when Mobius wanted to interrogate Sylvie, his request was directly rejected without a clear reason, only being told it was too dangerous. Second, Mobius had handed the panicked C-20 over to Ravana, only for her to go insane and take her own life during the interrogation. Both incidents seemed off, but Ravana stuck to her story, claiming it was for Mobius's own good. The more Ravana tried to hide the truth, the more Mobius wanted to know. Taking advantage of a moment when she was distracted, Mobius swapped her time controller. After leaving, he found a secluded spot and reviewed C-20's interrogation footage. Just as Loki had said, the memories of the Time Guards had been tampered with. After being possessed by Sylvie, C-20 had remembered fragments of her past. Finally, Mobius believed Loki's words and realized that Ravonna knew the truth but was still concealing it. It appeared that the Time Variance Authority had some serious issues. However, as soon as Mobius brought Loki out, they encountered Ravonna, who had discovered the issue with the Time Controller. Knowing he couldn't hide the truth any longer, Mobius had something he needed to say. He told Ravonna that she had asked where he would want to go, and now he wanted to visit the place where he had lived before joining the TVA. To everyone's surprise, Ravonna showed no mercy and pruned Mobius without hesitation. At the request of the Timekeepers, Ravonna brought the two Lokis to stand before them for judgment. This was the first time Loki and Sylvie had seen the Timekeepers, whom they had imagined for so long. They never expected the three gods to look so ugly and unintelligent. Sylvie thought the Timekeepers were responsible for her tragic fate, but she couldn't get close to them due to the collar around her neck. At that moment, the doors opened and B-15 appeared, unlocking the collars of the two Lokis. The once possessed B-15 had awakened some of her memories, and her ordinary yet happy past made her determined to expose the deception of the TVA. However, her fighting abilities seemed to have weakened after her change of heart, and she was quickly knocked unconscious. The two unrestricted Lokis engaged the guards in a fierce battle, while the Timekeepers watched calmly from above, seemingly unconcerned. Even after Loki and Sylvie defeated all the guards, the Timekeepers remained composed. They told Sylvie that she was also one of their offspring, but in response, Sylvie threw her weapon at the Timekeepers, beheading one of them. As the Timekeepers let out a peculiar laugh, Loki yelled for a halt. The two picked up the severed head, only to discover that all three were animatronic puppets. They had thought they had reached the end, but the Timekeepers turned out to be a hoax. So who was the true mastermind behind the scenes? Who had founded the TVA and orchestrated everything? After a brief moment of contemplation, Loki decided to tell Sylvie some information. However, before he could speak, he was ambushed from behind by Ravonna and pruned out of existence. Sylvie's anger reached its peak, but after restraining Ravonna, she didn't prune her directly. Instead, she wanted her to explain everything. Sylvie wasn't defeated by Loki's departure because she remembered what Loki said. They might lose, but they wouldn't die. Somewhere, Loki suddenly woke up, gasping for breath and wondering if he had arrived in hell. Just then, a voice came, and Loki looked up to see many versions of himself. It turned out that being pruned didn't mean death, but being sent to another space. At first, Loki didn't get along with the other Lokis, and full of questions, he couldn't help but yell at them. Kid Loki quickly calmed him down, explaining there was no need for such anger. In short, this place was the void, the end of time, and the TVA's dumping ground. Everything pruned by the TVA was here. Now they needed to avoid a living storm that could devour any matter and energy. Once pruned, all things would be swallowed instantly, no matter how they resisted. So, Loki joined the group of 4 and arrived at their secret base. He knew that only when he deviated from the main timeline in his own timeline would the TVA intervene and prune. Loki was curious about what his shitty counterparts had done in other timelines. Baldy Loki claimed he killed Captain America and Iron Man and collected all the Infinity Stones, but everyone knew he was bluffing. Crocodile Loki's story was more far-fetched, as he was pruned for eating a neighbor's cat. Kid Loki was quite proud, having killed Thor in his timeline, which was why he became the leader of the group. As for Loki's ultimate fate, he was killed while trying to assassinate Thanos. Unlike Loki, who preferred close combat, old Loki knew the power and importance of magic. When old Loki encountered Thanos, he created an incredibly realistic projection, disguising the illusion of being strangled. Afterward, he hid on a deserted planet until his twilight years. Old Loki, longing for his brother Thor, decided to return home to find his family, but this move deviated him from his destined path, and he was pruned. Old Loki realized that Loki could only play one role, that of the god of outcasts. This was their main story. Upon hearing all these absurd stories, Loki couldn't believe that they were so good at surviving and escaping, yet were content with staying here in the void. He began to persuade everyone to leave this desolate place and return to the Time Variance Authority. Outside, Sylvie, the female version of Loki, needed him and his strong muscles. The biggest threat preventing their escape was a dark cloud monster. If they all worked together, they could surely defeat it. However, Loki's impassioned speech was met with mockery from the others, who didn't believe they could kill the cloud monster. Annoyed, Loki left the bunker only to find several more Lokis appearing above the entrance. Led by the head Loki, these newcomers were part of another Loki faction that had always been at odds with the group of four. The invasion was an attempt to absorb the four into their ranks. As Kid Loki, the leader, was about to speak, he was interrupted by Baldy Loki, who had betrayed the group and brought the head Loki here. Baldy Loki's reason for betrayal was simple. He wanted to be the king of all Lokis. However, the head Loki only planned to use him, and in true Loki fashion, they ended up betraying each other and stabbing each other in the back. The chaotic melee began, with weapons of all sorts wielded in battle, and the crocodile Loki even bit off another's hormone-let-go hand. Disappointed, the main Loki wanted to leave as soon as possible. But the crafty old Loki, the only true magician present, created several illusions to distract their enemies and opened a portal to whisk the group away. Old Loki was disappointed, wondering why all versions of Loki behaved like this, always deceiving and killing one another. Loki wanted to expose the true nature of the TVA and change their so-called destinies. He had a plan to sneak up on the cloud monster while it was eating and stab it from behind. Both Kid Loki and Old Loki were almost speechless at the absurdity of this plan, now knowing how they could pierce a cloud and why resort to a sneak attack again. Just then, a car approached from a distance. It was Sylvie. It's then revealed that after Loki was pruned, she captured Judge Ravana and learned that pruning didn't lead to death but rather being sent to the void. So she decided to prune herself to find Loki. As soon as she arrived, she encountered the cloud monster and was rescued by a passing car. Inside, she found Mobius, a TVA agent who had been pruned earlier for helping Loki. Surprisingly, he had now saved Sylvie as well. Loki was thrilled to see them, knowing that they were both trustworthy people. With the knowledge that they were both safe, he could finally feel at ease. After introducing themselves, Loki shared his plan to kill the cloud monster with the two, but Sylvie disagreed. She revealed her own plan, which involved possessing the cloud monster. When she had been chased by the monster earlier, she had unintentionally possessed it for a brief moment. During that time, she sensed that the true mastermind behind the Time Variance Authority was hidden within. Thus, Sylvie needed to possess the monster again, even though it sounded highly risky. The group decided to rest and reconsider their plans. Mobius chatted with Kid Loki and Old Loki inside the house, while Loki and Sylvie talked outside. A sudden cold gust of wind blew, and Loki quickly wrapped himself in a blanket. Although Sylvie claimed she wasn't cold, Loki, who harbored feelings for her, created a large but hormone-smelling blanket to wrap around them both. However, the calm was only temporary, as they were about to face a great battle. Sylvie didn't force anyone to join her. Everyone had a choice, and her decision to possess the monster was her own. The others could opt out. She took out the time controller that she had taken from Ravana, which could open a portal back to the Time Variance Authority. The others could leave the void if they wished. Loki decided to stay and fight the cloud monster alongside Sylvie. Old Loki and Kid Loki had grown accustomed to the void and chose not to leave. Before departing, Kid Loki gave Loki a short sword as a gift and a blessing. In the end, only Mobius decided to return. After all, someone needed to expose Ravana and reveal the truth about the TVA. Loki watched Mobius, realizing how rare it was for him to find truly trustworthy friends. A handshake wasn't enough, so the two shared a big hug before parting ways. With everyone else gone, only Loki and Sylvie remained to face the cloud monster that loomed over the land. Fearless, they devised a plan. Loki would create a diversion to attract the monster's attention, while Sylvie would look for an opportunity to possess it. However, the monster seemed more interested in Sylvie. At the crucial moment, a green light appeared behind the monster. It was Old Loki, casting a spell to create an illusion of Asgard in its entirety. The Shining Kingdom successfully drew the monster's attention, allowing Loki and Sylvie to try possessing it. The cloud monster proved too powerful, and Old Loki reached his limit before the two could succeed. But this time, even at the very end, Old Loki didn't back down. He fought with all his might until the last moment. With Old Loki's help, the duo successfully possessed the cloud monster. As they opened their eyes, the thick fog around them quickly dispersed, revealing a brand new world before them. They exchanged a glance, knowing that the truth they sought lay ahead. Loki and Sylvie had finally reached this point, the end that was also a beginning. The great door slowly opened, revealing Miss Minutes, the artificial intelligence of the Time Variance Authority. As it turned out, Miss Minutes was a negotiator, tasked with persuading Loki and Sylvie to stop moving forward. The duo had overcome countless hardships to get here, so there was no way for them to give up now. Even when Miss Minutes offered tempting rewards, promising that they could return to their respective timelines and live the lives of their dreams, Loki and Sylvie still refused. No matter how appealing Miss Minutes' words were, they were all false. Undeterred, Loki and Sylvie pressed on, ready for battle as a door suddenly creaked open. The true puppet master was about to appear. This was the Mastermind, the time remnant mentioned by Miss Minutes, who appeared to be an ordinary man with a penchant for apples. The time remnant led the pair into an elevator, suggesting that some matters required a proper sit-down discussion. Loki remained on guard, while Sylvie, without hesitation, attempted to strike with her knife, but failed to hit. Unfazed, the time remnant seemed unafraid of potential attacks from behind, as Sylvie could not get the best of him. Eventually, Loki and Sylvie sat down, curious to hear what the time remnant had to say. The time remnant claimed to know everything, acknowledging that morally, erasing alternate timelines and preserving only one main timeline was wrong, just like suppressing diverse opinions and free speech. However, he argued that it was the most effective way to maintain universal peace. In one timeline, the time remnant was a 31st century scientist who accidentally discovered the existence of the multiverse. Around the same time, other versions of him also became aware of this discovery. Gradually, they began to communicate, sharing knowledge and technology to help one another. However, not every time remnant cherished peace. Some saw new worlds as new conquests. This eventually led to an all-out multiversal war, with each time remnant fighting for their own universe. Countless universes faced destruction until one day, the time remnant of this universe found a special creature born from the sorrow of reality, capable of devouring time and space. This creature was actually the cloud monster Loki had encountered earlier. The time remnant gained control of the creature, using it to devour his other selves and finally end the multiversal war. Afterward, he established the Time Variance Authority, isolating his own timeline and ensuring the smooth flow of the main timeline, preventing new branches and parallel universes from emerging, allowing for true peace. The Time Remnant knew that Loki and Sylvie had come to kill him, but if he were to die, the main timeline would lose its protection, and soon the multiversal war would erupt again. However, Loki and the others had another option, to take over the Time Variance Authority. In truth, their arrival here was orchestrated by the Time Remnant. Their winding journey, filled with transformations, was a necessary process to give meaning to the end. The Time Remnant, having maintained the timeline for so long, was tired and growing old. Loki pondered the truth of the Time Remnant story, while Sylvie remained entirely unconvinced. Having been persecuted by the Time Variance Authority her whole life, her ultimate goal was to kill its founder. The Time Remnant told the pair that they were not good people, and they had all done terrible things. Now, they had a legitimate opportunity to do those things in a justified manner. Just then, the Time Remnant sensed something was off. He once knew the course of all events, but now everything had changed. He knew nothing, not even where he would go next. All of this was related to the changes within the Time Variance Authority. Mobius, who had parted ways with Loki earlier, chose to return to the Time Variance Authority. He freed the imprisoned agent B-15, asking her to reveal the truth about the organization. B-15 led other agents to an ordinary high school, where they witnessed a principal version of Ravana who didn't recognize the agents before her. Mobius himself found Ravana and urged her to reveal the truth to everyone, asserting that the people in the agency had the right to know they were real humans, not creations of the Timekeepers. However, Ravana believed that existence had its reasons, and that someone who created the Timekeepers and established the TVA must have had a purpose. Seeing his old friend so stubborn, Mobius ultimately decided to strike her down. It seemed Mobius had forgotten that he was a civilian, while Ravana had been part of the armed division before becoming a judge in TVA. Mobius accepted the outcome, but in the end, Ravana couldn't bring herself to use her weapon against him. Back at the castle, the Time Remnant had explained everything, leaving the choice to Loki and Sylvie. Naturally, Sylvie chose to kill, believing there was nothing more to discuss, and that the Time Remnant was lying to save his own life. By killing him, she could end everything. Loki, on the other hand, felt that the Time Remnant was telling the truth, and if he were to die, the universe might become even more chaotic. At this point, Sylvie realized that Loki had been going in circles for so long because he wanted to rule the TVA. So she refused to believe his words any longer. Loki was surprised and hurt by how Sylvie saw him, but his main priority was to stop her from killing the Time Remnant. Loki pleaded with her to calm down, insisting that he didn't want to hurt her or claim any throne. All he wanted was for Sylvie to be safe. Seemingly moved, Sylvie kissed Loki without using her tongue, but using the moment to catch him off guard and push him through a portal, sending him back to the TVA, unable to stop her any longer. Sylvie was determined to kill the Time Remnant, who just laughed, showing no fear or pleading for mercy. With one swift move, she exacted her revenge, and it was all over. Outside the castle, the main timeline began to branch out, spreading like a spider's web. The TVA's detectors stopped working, and Loki pondered what the universe would become. He had no time to dwell on this, as he needed to find Mobius and warn everyone that the multiversal war was imminent, and chaos would engulf the entire universe. However, after explaining the situation, Loki was surprised to see that Mobius didn't recognize him at all. The statues of the three timekeepers had been replaced by a single figure, the Time Remnant, indicating that Loki had arrived in a new timeline, seemingly lonely without any companions, and here ends Season 1 of this drama. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.